planet. The most knowledgeable human being that can ever exist. God literally poured that all into Solomon. Why? Because he had an honest heart. He said, I wanted wisdom, I wanted knowledge, and God gave it to him. God gave it to him. So we see at the beginning of Solomon's reign, he was young, he was wise, he is very prosperous. Very prosperous. But again, the question is, why does Solomon begin his book in Ecclesiastes as a preacher? Why did he say vanity, vanity, all is vanity? Say it the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Well, let's learn some lessons real quick. And we're going to see how this man who was the wisest king, became the greatest fool. The wisest human being on this whole planet Earth become the most foolish. What happened? So let's learn some lessons, some experiences from a man who had everything, from a man who chased the invisible carrot, who chased more than anybody else. Let's learn something real quick. So let's learn the rest of the story. What happened? Let's go to 1 Kings 4. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 1. Remember, we're going to be in Kings a lot and learn some things from King Solomon. Remember the pinnacle of what a human being wants. Wisdom, knowledge, riches. So King Solomon was king over all of Israel. Now let's skip on down to verse 21. I'll be skipping through to Kings because of time's sake. I'll be skipping through. Now let's look at verse 21. And Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the river unto the land of the Philistines, unto the border of Egypt, and they brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. So he had a nice kingdom. Let's go to verse 25. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely under his vine and under his fig tree from Dan until Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. Remember, Solomon was a land of peace. And in verse 26, and Solomon had 40,000. How many I say? 40,000 what? 40,000, man. That blows my mind. I mean, I'm like 40. I mean, man, you can only ride one horse at a time. But, I mean, he had enough horses to ride one time in his whole lifetime. He's like, hey, buddy. He ride it once. He said, okay, it's like a disposable horse. He had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. I guess he had people to ride his horse. It's just like you have a fleet of cars. I have 40,000 Porsches, but I got men to drive my Porsche because you can't drive 40,000 Porsches. I mean, it's amazing. And then he says this in verse 27, and those officers provided victuals for King Solomon. That's made his needs, his food and things like that. And for all that came into the King Solomon's table, every man in his mouth lacked what? Nothing. He had it all. He had all that your hearts can desire. He had everything. What's it say in verse 30? Verse 30, let's look. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. And one thing you need to understand about Egypt, Egypt was known as the educational center. The place of philosophy, the place that people went to get their education. Don't you know, that's where a lot of where we get our modern education, by the way, from, is actually from Egypt. Don't you know, that's where Plato went, because that's where our whole educational system is literally on the foundation. I'm talking about modern education, our public and even in our Christian schools, is basically the foundation is Plato. Everybody know the Plato, the philosopher, the Greek philosopher. He's supposed to know so many great things. Well, guess where he got his training from? He got it from the universities of Egypt. And Egypt was known to be this wise place, this center of education. But Solomon, actually, his knowledge exceeded their knowledge. His knowledge exceeded their knowledge in mathematics and science and biology. They couldn't even match Solomon at all, because God placed this all in Solomon. I can imagine Solomon had to have a photographic memory. I mean, literally, he can just read one thing and said, okay, repeat it back to me. He can just give it to you in verbatim. And not only give it to you verbatim, then he can explain it and give you understanding and teach it to you. And he just saw it one time. That's the type of wisdom and knowledge that Solomon had. Verse 31, for he was wiser than any man, all men, than Ethan, the Ezrahite, the Heman, Chalcol, the Darda, the sons of Michal, and his fame was in all nations round about. He spake 3,000 proverbs. You read the book of Proverbs, and you see the wisdom that he has. His songs were 1,005. Isn't that something? Verse 33, he spake of trees from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. He spake of the beasts and of the fowls and the creeping things. He knew all about trees. He knew all about everything you could talk about. Hey, Solomon, well, tell me what kind of tree is that? He could tell you right away. Solomon, what kind of flower is that? He could tell you right away. What kind of herb is that? He could tell you right away. That's the type of wisdom Solomon had. And then you say, Lord, Solomon, tell me some more about the body, how the body works. He could tell you right away exactly how it works. That is powerful. And there came all, in verse 34, and there came all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon from kings of the earth, which had heard his wisdom. And again, that was a main purpose. God set Solomon up to literally be a spectacle to the world so he can point everybody to God and Jesus. That's the type of wisdom he gave him. That's how powerful kind of power that God placed in Solomon. It was so much so, you see all the kings, it didn't say some of the kings, they all heard about Solomon. They said, man, we got to see this man. And Queen of Sheba. We go to 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1. Look at that. Don't you know one of the famous queens that you hear about in history? Queen of Sheba. Queen Sheba. She said, I got to see what this man is all about. This dude, I mean, you trying to tell me he knows about everything? I mean, come on, nobody knows everything. Ain't no way. I'm telling you, Queen, this man, he knows he's so wise and he's so knowledgeable. No. We got to go. So she goes, and we see here in chapter 10, verse 1. And when Queen Sheba heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with what? Hard questions. Now, remember you took your math class back in the day? You always start on question number 1. And it may have 30 questions, but you always start on the question number 1. You may not even make it to question number 30. But as you continue to go, it gets harder and harder and harder and harder. Well, she skipped all that and said, I want you to ask you question number 30, the hardest question. So she asked him the hardest question that you can think of. Tell me, explain to me, Solomon. Give me all the chemical formulas of ammonia. Give me the chemical formula of ammonia. Okay, all right, you know that. Okay, why don't you give me the periodical chart? I want you to give it to me backwards. And not only that, give me the weights of each chemical, the atomic weight. He said, hey, no problem. Oh, whoa, man. All right, I got to bring my mathematicians out. All right, take this problem right here. You see this calculus problem. This is the hardest calculus problem. There's nobody in our land could actually figure this calculus problem out. Solomon, here, you figured it out. He said, no problem, man. Shh. In verse 3, it says, Solomon told her all the questions. There was not anything hid from the king which he told her not. He knew everything. Everything you can think of, he knew it. Everything you can even conceive in your mind, he knew it. I bet he even knew. I mean, he knew some things. I bet he knew some things. He was so smart. He was so wise. If he wanted to, he could have went ahead and put electricity together. I mean, that's how much wisdom he had. He could have, we think we're so wise. We think we're so smart. It was already done in Solomon. He didn't do it. Why? Because we figure out why he didn't do it. He didn't fulfill his potential. But then we see that's how smart he was. In verse 4, and when the queen of Sheba have seen all Solomon's wisdom and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and their cupbearers, and his acts as a scent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. She was literally like, wow. I mean, she is like, wow. I mean, she is like, I can't believe it. And she said to the king, it is a true report that I've heard in my own land of the acts of thy wisdom. Howbeit, I believe not the words. I didn't believe it. There's no way until I came, and my eyes have seen it. And behold, the half was not told to me. Thy wisdom and prosperity exceedeth the fame which I've heard. Happy are the men, and happy are these servants which stand continually before thee, that I hear thy wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delight in thee to set thee on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore made thee ye king to do judgment and justice. Was that a witness to God or what? Solomon was a witness for God, and God placed it in him to be a witness, to literally be a spectacle to the world, and then have Israel, to guide Israel, to lead Israel, to be the head and not the tail. God said, let me educate you, Solomon. Did you notice that Solomon, did he go to any schools here? Did you notice that? Did he go to the University of Egypt? Did he go to the University of Babylon? Where school did he go to become the most smartest man in the whole world, the wisest man? He literally went to the commandments and statutes of God. He went to God himself, and God taught him. How did he learn about science? God taught him. He was a teacher. How did he learn about math? God was a teacher. And you can see the results. And if we remember these basic principles, we will see the results. Let's see how much wealth he had. Now, in 1 Kings 10:14, in 1 Kings 10:14, we see that now the weight of gold that came to Solomon 1 year was 606 talents of gold. He was blinging every single year. That was just his salary. That was just what he got him. That was his salary. That's what he got that was guaranteed to him. And then he had extra stuff that came. And in verse 17, it says he made 300 shields beaten with gold. Man had so much gold, he made his shields out of gold. 300 pounds of gold went to one shield. 300 pounds of gold went to one shield. And one king put them in the house of the forest 11. In verse 18, moreover, the king made great thrones of ivory, overlaid it with gold. Check out his throne. Check out his throne. And this is an example right here. Check out his throne. Look at his throne. Verse 19. The throne has 6 steps. The top of the throne was round behind, and there were stands on either side of the place of the seat. And there were 2 lions beside the stands, and 12 lions stood there on one side, and the other 6 steps. And there was none like made in any kingdom. I skipped over verse 18. But his throne was ivory, overlaid with gold. The best gold. So his throne, there's no other throne like his throne. His throne was the bling bling of the whole entire earth. His throne, look at all these lions. I mean, when you came into his throne, you're like, wow. Your heart just beats because all the gold. You probably put wearing sunglasses because it was shining so much. So you see the wealth. It said in verse 23, so King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and wisdom. And all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. In verse 26, and Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots. He had 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in cities for chariots with the king at Jerusalem. He had so many chariots, he had so much stuff, he had to have cities to hold his stuff. That's how much stuff he had. So he had an abundance of stuff. He had everything your mind can desire, he had it. Now, what was God's counsel to Solomon? Now, remember David's counsel to Solomon. Did God's counsel change from David's counsel to Solomon? So what was God's counsel to Solomon when Solomon completed the house of the Lord, when he built that beautiful, beautiful building for God? The most beautiful building that Israel ever had. They never had a building like it. King Solomon's building or temple. Let's go to 1 Kings 9:1 real quick. 1 Kings 9:1. 1 Kings 9:1. I mean, Solomon had it. I mean, you can't. Just think about what man wanted today. Just think about what are some things man wants today. What's the most expensive car that you know about? A Porsche, a Ferrari, a Lamborghini. Now, when it comes to houses, just think of the most expensive house on this earth. Solomon had it. Think of the most expensive car on this earth. Solomon had it. The most expensive motorcycle. Solomon had it. He had it. He had it. But what was God's counsel? Let's look at it, 1 Kings 9, 1 through 9, real quick. And it came to pass when Solomon had finished the building of the house of the Lord and king's house and all of Solomon's desires which he had pleased to do, that the Lord appeared to Solomon the second time he appeared in Gibeon. Remember, he appeared him the first time. Now he comes to him again. In verse 3, and the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me, and I have hallowed this house which thou hast built and to put in my name there forever, in my eyes, and my heart shall be there perpetually. In verse 4, and if thou walk before thee as David thy father walketh in integrity of thy heart and uprightness, to do all that I've commanded thee, and keep all the statutes of my judgment, I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. But what does he say in verse 6? But this is the warning. But. That's that coordinating conjunction. But if thou shalt turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve after gods and worship them, then will I do what? What's going to do? He said, I'm going to cut you off. Verse 7, I will cut you off from out of the land which I have given them, and this house which I have hallowed for my name, I cast out of my sight, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among the people. In verse 8, and at this house which is high above every one that passes by shall be astonished, and shall hiss, and they shall say, why hath the Lord done this unto this land and unto this house? Why? Because they have left God, chased after Egypt and Babylonian gods. So remember the warning. God said, you put me first. Remember the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then he's going to add everything you need. And that's what he's saying here to Solomon, the same exact thing. Now, did Solomon stay true to the principles and commandments of God? How in the world did the wisest man become the most foolish man in his whole entire earth? What happened, Solomon? Why are you preaching to us like this, Solomon? Because he's preaching from experience. We go to 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 11. We read a sad story. Because we see here in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1, it says, but King Solomon loved many strange women. Solomon loved many strange women. You know that he got a problem now, don't you? You know he about to mess up. Because he lusted after many strange. Why did he call them strange? Because they were estranged from God. They were not godly women. That's why the Bible calls them strange women. And he couldn't get enough of them. Together with the daughter of Pharaoh, the women of Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Sidonians, the Hittites. In verse 2, of the nations concerning the Lord saith the children of Israel, ye shall not go unto them, neither shall that come unto you, for surely they would turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. He knew what the commandment said. He knew what the statutes was, but his lust after these strange women literally pulled him down. Now, let me ask you a question. God says you should have one wife, right? Now, it makes it very clear. I mean, you can only handle one wife, and you can only handle one man. Now, how many wives did King Solomon have? He didn't just have two. Two has to be a headache. 3 would be, insanity. But in verse 3, it says he had 700 wives, princes, 300 concubines, and the wives turned away his heart. 700 wives. You can't even see 700 wives in a year. It'll take you almost 2 years just to get through 700 wives. 700. So that's to show you everything his heart desired, he had it. And everything his lustful heart desired, he had it. Thank you. Everything that a man's heart can lust. See, before everything, God blessed him with everything, with knowledge and wisdom and blessings that he showed it. He was able to live it, but now his heart turns corrupt because of the strange women. And everything that a man's a worldly heart can get, Solomon got it. You can't get more than 700 wives. Verse 4 says, for it came to pass when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. What is Solomon's main message for us as a preacher? That's the reason why he says vanity, vanity, all is vanity. When you go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2, he said vanity, vanity, all is vanity. He says in verse 8, look at Ecclesiastes 1 verse 8, he says all are full of labors. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that had been is the thing which shall be. And the thing which is done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. Verse 12, I, the preacher, was king over Israel, or in Jerusalem. I have seen all the works to be done under the sun. Behold, what did he say? All is vanity. He is preaching to us. I had it all. It's all vanity and vexation of spirit. Don't you know what that means? Spirit literally in that context means breath. Vexation means lack of. He said, it's trying to get breath, but can't get it. He's saying, we're trying to go after these things. We're trying to get life from it. And there's no life in it. In verse 17, I gave my heart to know wisdom, and this is it. I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived. Solomon is an old man at this point. He says, I perceive something. It's what? Also vexation of spirit. You're not going to get breath from it. You're not going to get air from it. You're not going to get life from it. What's he say? All is vanity. He says all is vanity and vexation of spirit. And there is no profit under the sun. Remember, we're learning a lesson from somebody who had it all. So why are we as a people of God still trying to chase invisible carrots? Why are we trying to chase these things of the world? In the end, Solomon's telling us there is nothing at the end. He says it gives us more wisdom in verse 10 and Ecclesiastes 5 verse 10. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. Also is vanity. Once you get it, you're not going to be satisfied. And he's revealing that to us right now. So why do we worry? What is the lessons that Jesus teaches us in Matthew 16:26? We all know the text. We heard it many times. What profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? This is what Solomon is telling us. What profit it is all vanity if you gain the whole world. Solomon said, I had it. For a man that's living, a human being that was living on this earth, he was the man that had it all. He had it. He's saying, what is it? What does James 4:14 say? James 4:14, whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. But what is your life? What is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, then vanishes away. Remember, all people, especially young people, only what you do for Christ will last. We can try to keep on chasing these invisible carrots. There's nothing out there. I wish we as adults tell the truth to our children. We try to say, oh, if you become this big-time lawyer, then your life will be great. No, it won't. Quit lying to them. Oh, if you become a doctor, then everybody will be loving you. You become this big-time businessman working on Wall Street. Oh, life will be great. We're lying to them. Solomon, who had it all, is telling us what's the end result. He said it's vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Because then what was his appeal? Let's go to Solomon's appeal as we wrap this up. Because his appeal, he finally came back to the same counsel, and he's given us that same counsel that the Lord gave, that David gave Solomon, that the Lord gave Solomon, and Solomon given us today. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 12, verse 8. Ecclesiastes 12:8. And he ends it off. He ends the last chapter, the last part of his sermon. He ends it like this, starting with verse 8, and then we're going to look at 13 and 14. He ends it like this. What does he say? He said what he said at the beginning of his sermon. He said, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. Didn't he say at the beginning of the sermon? Now he's saying at the end of the sermon. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Emptiness, emptiness, this world is emptiness, has nothing to offer you. Verse 13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. What's he say? He said what? Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And recognize this, all people, for God shall bring every work into judgment, and every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. And that was his conclusion, the whole thing. And that's what he's telling us today. Remember, only what you do for Christ will last. So, have we learned a lesson from this preacher today? This preacher. So we as ministers continue to go forward in doing the work of God. So let me tell you something. You ain't missing nothing out there. You're not missing anything. There's nothing out there. Let's tell our young people the truth. Tell them the truth. The only satisfaction you're going to receive is through Jesus Christ. That's the only way you're going to get fulfillment and fulfill the purpose that God has for you. It's literally doing the works of Christ. That's the reason why being a minister for Christ is the highest work that a person can do. And whatever area the Lord will have the person to minister, but that is the highest work. There is no other work. We need to encourage our young people to do the work of God. Young man, be a missionary for God. Quit patting on the back and saying, oh, I'm so glad you're going to be an engineer for the world. No! We're literally pushing them down the road of destruction. There's nothing out there. Yes, they're very good at math. God can make you good at math. Yes, they're good at inventing things. God can make you good at inventing things. God can make you an engineer for him. We don't need to work for IBM anymore. We don't need to work for Microsoft anymore. We need to work for the Lord in these last days. Let's tell them the truth. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And fixation of spirit. You're not going to get satisfied. You're not going to get air. You're not going to get any breath from it. This is the work that God has us to do. And if you want to do the will and work of God, let us all raise your hand. Raise your hand. If you want to do the will and work of God, recognize this world has nothing to offer you. Has zero, nothing. So why we keep chasing after the invisible carrot? Let's stop chasing these invisible carrots. Let's start pushing our children and chasing these invisible carrots. Because the day is the day of salvation. I'm telling you, the time is now. Aren't you tired of this world? Tired of it. Has nothing to offer. Nothing.